I'm a third year PhD student at Paris One Panthéon-Sorbonne University. And I'm going to present my job market paper on circular railroad, and I'm going to focus on the Parisian evidence. So about the motivation, European cities during the 19th century face a number of challenges. For example, sanitary crises, but also population pressure within the historical city center. They are even slum, poor transport network, and they also mainly relied on medieval street network. And so at the end, there's European cities, there was a necessity of urban planning to either restructure the cities, but also to address these issues. And Paris, as a leading capital, is a really good example because during the early 40s, there were no road network, no connection between train station, only a radial omnibus network. If you look at the map of État-Major, we can see that the periphery was really poorly developed. And also there were a lot of cholera pandemic. And so Napoleon III, when he took the power in 1851, he wanted to modernize Paris through two main reforms. So a Petite Ceinture Railroad and also Haussmann renovation that you probably may know. And today I'm going to focus on the Petite Ceinture Railroad. Okay, so this reform, Napoleon III ordered the creation of the Petite Ceinture Railroad in 1852. And because it was designed for merchandise, it does not cross the city center. Okay, so it has a circular shape, and it has been progressively developed in three different phases, with first the Auteuil Railroad, then the Petite Ceinture Rive Gauche, and finally Petite Ceinture Rive Droite, and finally the Petite Ceinture Rive Gauche. And because it was designed for merchandise, it has a dual function, which is decrease the freight cost, but also decrease the commuting time of passenger. And due to this due to this design, the Petite Ceinture is a circular railroad, and it stands in contrast with some historical urban transport system that has been developed during the second half of the 19th century. We can think about London, but also Chicago and so on. Because there's historical urban transport system, they were mostly radial, and they also mostly carry passenger. Okay, so the Petite Ceinture is going to provide a natural experiment to isolate stretchment effect due to limited transport network at this time, and also give an opportunity to evaluate the circular design effectiveness. Paris, at this time, when we look at the population evolution during the 19th century, it doubled. Okay, but this growth hides some heterogeneity. And if we look at, if we make the distinction between population growth between the historical city center and the historical periphery, we can see that there has been a disconnection between both population trend during the 50s, when there has been the implementation of the Petite Ceinture Railroad, but also Haussmannian renovation, and so on. Okay? So at the end, this paper is going to use a new Parisian dataset over 150 years, which is going to provide some detailed information on firm, but also resident activities, to answer two main research questions. So the first one, did the Petite Ceinture change the spatial growth of firm and residents? So this is about the short-term effect of the Petite Ceinture. And second research question, did the Petite Ceinture create a long-lasting effect on Parisian spatial equilibrium? So this is about the long-term effect. So for the short-term effects, I'm going to exploit spatial and time variation of market access. And then I'm going to build a new quantitative urban model to quantify the aggregate impact on city center migration, but also the design effectiveness. For the long-term effect, I'm going to exploit the fact that due to metro competition at the beginning of the 20th century, the Petite Ceinture traffic decline, and I'm going to use a population long difference between 1906 and 1954. So today I'm going to mainly focus on the first research question, which is the short-term effect of the Petite Ceinture. And if I have time, I will talk about the long-term effect, but I don't think so. Okay. For the contribution, I'm going to speak to mainly three literatures. So the first one is obviously the urban transport infrastructure, where I'm going to add a new quasi-natural experiment with a circular transport system. Okay. And then I'm going to, sorry. Okay. I'm going also to contribute to the quantitative urban literature, where I'm going to extend the Berlin Wall framework, so this paper, where I'm going to add two sectors, non-tradable and tradable good, to model the dual function of the Petite Ceinture. And I'm going to do it by including an Arlington model to consider trade within the city. And lastly, I'm going also to contribute to the path dependency literature, where I'm going to add a new setting where there has been an intensive use of urban transport system, and then it has shut down due to metro competition. And this relates to historical route of spatial sorting within the city. But again, I'm not going to talk about today. Okay. So for the data, I'm going to exploit several data sets that I've also collected myself. So the first one is about the residents. So I'm going to be able to observe the population evolution for the Parisian neighborhoods over 150 years through the dénombrement statistique, but also annual statistic and the INSEE. Okay, then about the firm, I'm going to use a new dataset provided by the ANR Sudoku, which gives the location of firm activities over the 19th century with the city directories. Okay, so maybe we can have a look on the growth, and as we can see, if we look at the firm growth over this period, you can see that there is a huge expansion of firm in Paris. And what we can do, we can also have a look on this firm, but with the grid. Okay, and we can basically see the same pattern. Okay, then I'm also going to use some housing price data for the Parisian neighborhood through the Parisian fiscal data. Which is going to be crucial for the structural model to recover some unobserved characteristics such as productivity and amenities. And as we can see, there is fiscal data described that the Parisian neighborhood were more costly in the west of Paris. Okay. I also provide some new data about the urban transport network with obviously the Petite Ceinture Railroad, but also other railroad, tramway, omnibus, and also streets. So before jumping to the religious from evidence, do not hesitate to ask any question. Okay. So for the religious from evidence, so first, about the short-term effect, I'm going to use a long difference strategy between 1861 and 1896. And I'm going to consider two measures, so firm and residential market access. So these measures are based on this paper of Donaldson and Hornbeck. And so, for example, we can take the firm market access, and it is going to be function of the population, but also the commuting costs. So it's going to be the weighted sum of population weighted by the commuting costs. And for the residential market access, it's going to be not the population, but the firm. And at the end, so if we take, for example, the firm market access, is going to measure the access to population, not only by the own location population, but also your neighborhood, your neighbor. And same for the residential market access.
Sorry,
And yeah,
I have a question about this measure. So the firm market access captures how firms have access to inputs of production, which are people, but also potential customers, or
exactly. Yeah.
how should we think about it?
It's mostly about consumers, so you might be interested in how far you are from population to sell your product, but also, yeah, to get your labor force into the production function. Yeah, exactly. So this is about the firm market access. And for the residential market access, is the same, but access to also employment, but also to consumption services and so on. Okay? Okay, good. Thank you. So these market access measures are going to capture changes in commuting time that are not localized because you're not going to define any threshold such as 50, 100 meter to define your treatment and control group. But at the end, so as I said, there is no control group. Okay, so you cannot use some event study plot and so on. But these market access are going to be sufficient statistic to capture a general equilibrium effect, as shown by these two papers of Tsivanidis and Rising. Okay, when we ignore some changes in housing supply, but also productivities and amenities. And maybe we can have a look on the changes in firm market access. And as we can see, it's really close to the Petite Ceinture Railroad station that there's been a huge increase in market access for film. Okay. All right. So about the empirical specification, so as I said, I'm going to consider long differences where the dependent variable is going to be the outcome growth in a location and between both periods. The variable of interest is going to be the growth of market access in the location and between both periods. And is going to be either the firm or the residential market access growth, depending of the outcome variable, okay? If we are interested in the growth of firm, we are looking at the firm market access. And if we are looking at the growth of population, we will have a look on the impact of the residential market access. I'm also going to control for Haussmannian renovation proximity and also the distance to center to capture mechanical expansion from the city center. Okay. So now I'm going to show you some plots with the estimate of the market access. So first about the firm growth, I'm going to consider the total amount of firm. So the growth of firm, sorry. But also, I'm going to consider two specific firms, factories and services. Why? Factories, they can be interested in having a high market potential in order to export final goods they produce, and services in order to import final goods and sell them to Parisian consumer. Okay? And as we can see in the baseline specification without any control, we can see that there is a really strong effect of market access, especially for these services. But at this stage, this estimate is biased due to the fact that there is this mechanical expansion from the city center. So when we control for the Haussmannian renovation, but also the distance to the center, we can see that the estimate decrease in magnitude, but still remains positive and significant, both for factories but also services. Okay, but at this stage, there is still some issue, some endogeneity issue, sorry, and mainly due to reverse causality. Okay, population is going to influence firm, but also firms is going to influence population. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use an instrumental variable strategy, which is really standard in the literature. What I'm going to do, I'm going to set the numerator of the market access to the initial level. And with that, I'm going to only exploit variation in committing cost. Okay? So we can have a look on the change of firm market access with this strategy. And we can see that this is mainly concentrated toward station of the Petite Ceinture. And when I instrument the firm market access, we can see that the coefficients again decrease, but remain positive and significant. And they are not statistically different from the specification with control. Okay. All right. So then turning to the residential growth, so I'm going to consider population, but also rent as an outcome. And here it's a residential market action change, so the access to firm. Okay. And again, positive and significant effects. When I add the control, it remains positive and significant. And when I use this same instrumental strategy, sorry, the instrument variable strategy, it remains positive and significant. Okay. So I conduct several robustness checks, but also placebo. So for the fair market access, I investigate whether the change of fair market access has a positive effect on some firm that do not have an interest to locate near to the Petite Ceinture, and such as, for example, liberal profession. Okay. And we can see that in the third column, when using the instrumental variable strategy, there is no effect. Okay. Then for the effect of the residential market access, I'm going to consider the population growth between a period before the treatment. And we can see that, again, when we look at the third column with the instrumental variable strategy, no effect, which is reassuring. I also conduct several alternative specifications with market access measures, such as two-way fixed effect model, and also Poisson regression for the firm outcome, and all the results remain positive and significant. And so this was in the previous version of the draft. I also conduct some other strategies, such as target defensive design. When I consider a 500-meter threshold as treatment, and I found a positive effect on the ceinture on the population, retail, and also factories density. I also test whether it holds when I use some sensitivity analysis on the pre-train, and all the results are robust. And I also found that there is no effect of the ceinture railroad on street density, which is really going to tell you that the results are driven by the decrease in commuting time and not urbanization. Okay. So about the long-term effects, I'm going to be really brief on that. So I'm going to exploit the metro arrival, which is going to mark the decline of Petite Ceinture traffic. And I'm going to consider the long differences of population between 1906 and 1954. Okay, so the outcome is going to be the population growth within the neighborhood between both periods. And here, so this is still preliminary, but I'm going to consider a dummy equal to 1 if the neighborhood is within 500 meters of Petite Ceinture train station in here. And I'm also going to control for neighborhood characteristic. And to sum up, I found that even after the decline of the Petite Ceinture, neighborhoods that were close by 500 meters of Petite Ceinture train station increased by 23% between both periods. And it's also robust to use alternative measure or when I vary the ending period. Okay. So if there is no question, I'm going to jump to the structural model. All right. So I'm going to use a quantitative spatial model to rationalize the within-city spatial equilibrium in 1896. I'm going to consider non-tradable and tradable sector, which is going to allow me to consider a freight cost, and is going to allow me to recover unobserved location characteristics such as sector-specific wages, amenities, prices of tradable and non-tradable, and also rateable values. And at the end, when I rationalize my within-city spatial equilibrium, I can conduct several counterfactual exercises, such as removing the structure and look at what happened to the spatial economic distribution of the economic activity, and also implement a radial metro instead of the structure and look at the welfare effect and the aggregate impact. For the required data, I need to observe at the neighborhood level the residence employment, so where do people live, the workplace employment by sector, so where do people work, the rent, and the commuting costs. So I do not observe the workplace employment by sector, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to use city directories that geolocalize firm by activities to estimate the workplace employment. So what I'm going to do here is the sum of firm by sector, and I'm going to apply to those firms a weight based on the average worker intensity by industry. Okay. And with that, I'm going to capture the fact that a small shop in food or alimentation is going to use on average less worker that factory that produce some clothing, for example. Okay. So I'm going to do it by sector and by location. And as a validity test, I did this exercise and I compare this the workplace employments at the arrondissement level estimated with the city directories compared to the actual one observed with the data. And we can see that there is a positive and a strong correlation between both, which is reassuring. Okay, so about the model environment. So as I said before, it's going to be mainly an extension of the Berlin Wall paper, where for the worker side, workers are going to choose where to live and where to work and which sector. And to do so, the utility function is going to be function of the amenities in the residence, wage in the workplace and by sector. The utility is going to be also function of the commuting costs and the price of tradable and the services. Finally, it's going to be also function of the rents, and workers are going to experience a fresh shock. And through this fresh shock, we can use standard properties to express the probability that a worker choose the location pair Ni in a sector G as follow. Okay. Then for the tradable sector, I'm going to model it through a Cobb-Douglas technology. And I'm going to introduce an Arlington model to derive gravity equation and a price index for traded goods. For the non-tradable sector, is going to be a model through a monopolistic competition, which is going to allow me to derive price index for non-tradable services. Regarding the housing market, I'm going to consider elastic housing supply, and I'm going to make the assumption that there is no distortions of housing allocation between firm and residents. So this is more classic as in the literature. And finally, I'm going to consider some agglomeration forces with the amenities function of residence density. And the amenities are going to be, so the agglomeration forces are going to be governed by this parameter. Okay. About the quantification, so the model is going to be quantified step by step. So the first step is to calibrate your structural parameter or to estimate this one. Then, when you calibrate your structural parameter, you can use some conditional probability condition and also the commuting market clearing condition. You're going to combine that with your observed workplace employment, residence employment, and commuting costs, and you're going to be able to recover your wages by sector. Once you recover your wages, I'm going to use CES preference properties with observed vector on commuting costs and rent to recover prices of services and tradable. Then, with the wages, the prices of services and tradable, I can use the expected utility in an open city setting, sorry, with the observed residential choice to recover amenities. And finally, I can use the housing market clearing condition combined with the estimated commercial and residential housing demand to recover the rateable values. Okay, so the rateable value is going to be the values of the housing, but also the land. So when the model is invert step by step, your equilibrium is rationalized, and what you can do, you can compare for example, your housing demand with the actual one to assess the model fit, and you can see that the um, the the model is able to capture perfectly the housing demand. Regarding your fundamental, so it's going to be it's going to give you the amenities, the spatial distribution of the amenities, and as we can see, amenities are higher in the west of Paris, which is consistent with the East Side Story paper. And to test that, I do just the correlation between the high income residents and the amenities, and I get a positive correlation. Okay.
Before you
Yeah.
start with the counterfactual, maybe it's because I'm not very familiarized with these models, but I struggle to understand what is the role of having tradable versus non-tradable sector, and how you identify how people choose whether to work on one sector in another. It's just the wages, or is there any other consideration?
Yeah, it's exactly it's the wages only. So workers are going to use to choose, sorry, which sector to work based on the wages. Okay, and here it's important because it's going to consider the dual function of the petite ceinture that decrease commuting time of passenger of workers, sorry, but also decrease the freight costs. Okay. So we can see that we will see that in the counterfactual exercise is going to have an impact on the price of tradable and also the commuting cost. Okay. For the counterfactual procedure, I'm going to use exact algebra, which is an approach that has been popularized by Declan and all. And to build a measure of welfare effect, I'm going to apply Henry-George theorem, which says that the gain are going to be within the land. Okay. So landlords are going to experience gain following an impact of an infrastructure. And I'm going to consider this economic impact which is going to be the gain of rectable values, so the land, okay, within the city, divided by the total cost of construction of an infrastructure M. So I'm going to calibrate my cost of the infrastructure based on some archive data for the Petite Ceinture. And for the metro, I'm going to use measure from this paper of Eblick and Hall, which focus on the London metro. Okay. So when I remove the Petite Ceinture, we can see that globally there is a relocation of the economic activity toward the city center. Okay, both for the workplace employment. So there is a decrease in the workplace employment for the neighborhood in the periphery, and there is a decrease in the readers employment in the periphery also. And if we look at the change of the tradable price, we can see that it increased mainly in the periphery, so where the Petite Ceinture is located. Okay. So now about the second counterfactual exercise, I'm going to consider an alternative network, and I'm going to construct a radial metro as in London with 20 metro stations, each 1 kilometer, so as a Petite Ceinture. And I'm going to look at the impact on the spatial economic distribution and also the welfare effect. So when we implement a radial metro instead of a Petite Ceinture, we can see that it's going to increase the workplace employment in the city center, but it is going to increase the residence employment in neighborhoods that are located in the periphery. And with these results, we've got a separation of workplace and residence as Eblick, Sturm, and Reading found in their paper with the Metro of London. Then I turn to the economic impact and design complementarity. So with the Henry-George theorem and also the calibrated construction costs. So about the first column, so it's about the counterfactual scenario without the Petite Ceinture. We can see that there is a small change, negative change of the population overall within the city. Same for the rateable value, and which give economic impact factor of 1.17, which is pretty low. Then considering the second counterfactual exercise with the radial metro, we can see that there is a strong impact on the population. Same for the rateable value, but the cost is higher than the Petite Ceinture. And at the end, we've got an economic impact factor of 5.7, which is standard and what found Eblick and Hall on their paper in London. Then I consider the scenario when I put both the Petite Ceinture and the radial metro, and we can see that it increase again the population, rateable value, but also the construction costs. Then I turn to the complementarity evaluation. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to consider the scenario dependently. So without the Petite Ceinture and also the radial metro, compared to this scenario when I put both together. And as we can see, putting both together creates some additional gain and increase the rateable value, which tell you that both the circular design but also the radial one are really complement in decreasing the commuting cost, in increasing the welfare of the commuter within the city. Okay. So to sum up the paper, I provide some reduced form evidence of the censure, and I show that 1% increase in market access increase the population, but also rents, and also factories and retail. And in the structural part, I show that shutting down the Petite Ceinture decrease the Parisian population in a really small amount. And it also creates a relocation of the worker and residents towards the historical city center. And finally, I show that looking at the transport design, that a radial metro system is more efficient than the Petite Ceinture, sorry, a circular design. And it also creates a separation between workplace and residence. But considering both together, a circular but also a radial transport infrastructure, this allows to gain several welfare effects. And it tells you that there are really complements in decrease commuting cost within the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Very interesting presentation. Now we are going to have a short discussion by Arthur, and then we will see if someone from the audience has any questions or comments. So Arthur, if you want to start your discussion.
Perfect. Yes, I will share my screen. Let's see. Does that work?
Yes.
Visible? Okay, perfect. So thank you so much, Paul, for this. As requested, I'm not going to summarize, but just in terms of contributions, clearly, as Paul pointed out, there is paper looks at public transportation that connects suburbs with each other, which is less commonly looked at. And I think it's important to stress that this is something that's happening a lot now also. Even just in Paris, where both Paul and I are based, there are concentric metro lines being built right now, 15 a bit more closer, 18 further out. There are many other contexts, both historical but also really contemporary ones, where this is something that's increasingly being added. And so it has high topical relevance also for that reason. The comprehensive modeling of commuting and trade is another important contribution on persistence effects. And really, as is often the case in economic history, this is an impressive work in terms of collecting and digitalizing, combining different types of data sources and thinking creatively about where to find them, what can be done, and how can we get a common picture through this model. So that was very cool and interesting, and useful too. On questions I had, I was thinking about the location of more maybe than the rail itself of the specific stations along the rail. So what explains where they are located or not? Are there larger other connections out of the city, for instance? Are there major factories? Is it maybe the opposite case, that there's just free space because there's less going on already, so you can build something there? And to what extent, both in terms of anecdotal descriptions, but also to what extent can this be predicted with observable variables available? For instance, free space might be relatively easy to map from historical maps. And I'm not that concerned given the neighborhood fixed effects. So that would capture a lot of this, but it will still be informative in terms of knowing what kind of complementarities might be there, whereby if you have already existing transport infrastructure, for instance, then maybe there's a multiplier effect of having a certain a type of connection there. So if you think of, there are several, the railway stations in Paris are not in the absolute city center, but they're sort of in a slight circle around, depending on which direction you're traveling in France and even abroad. and the extent to which proximity to this other infrastructure might create agglomeration effects would be something that's interesting to, at the minimum, discuss, but also potentially even quantify. And related to that, is it possible to simulate what would happen given that there is already simulation of a radial system, so of a counterfactual? It would be also interesting to look at a counterfactual that's just changing less, changing maybe how close these stations are located along the rail, for instance. Yeah. And in terms of counterfactuals, a bit related, currently treated neighborhoods are compared to other neighborhoods, generally in Paris, but it might be hard to know exactly what is the most relevant set of comparable neighborhoods here. So thinking that around this time, with these Haussmann era expansions of Paris, you do have a wider set of new neighborhoods of Paris. So similarly, former suburbs that were integrated. I don't know if there's enough statistical power to focus on those and look at proximity to a Petit Ceinture station versus not stations being as close within that set of potentially more comparable neighborhoods. And so the analysis focuses on 400 by 400 meter grid cells, and it does make sense as a distance in terms of walkability, not least since you would typically walk to your closest station. But I will still be interested in seeing more on the sensitivity to the size of these grid cells, and just to really get a sense of how local are these effects, at which scale are these agglomerations happening. So at its simplest, just varying these types of grid cell sizes, maybe, what is considered a control? Could there be donut between treated and control to get so that controls are less likely to experience spillovers, for instance? And a little bit on external validity as well. So this was a polluting transport mode, which Paul talks about. If we think of what we can learn about these types of circular transport options or transport options that connect suburbs, today they are generally electrified and don't have almost any neighborhood pollution, other than sometimes maybe sound pollution if it's above ground. So it'd be interesting to at least have some kind of discussion of what would apply to this current context. What can we learn in a setting where the fuel has changed, and how can that affect the attractivity of the local neighborhood? And a slightly different point on external validity as well. So Paul does a radial model with a west-east line and a north-south line in a sort of straight lines, but there are existing metro lines in Paris that largely fill this role. So there's line 1 does west-east and line 4 does north-south. And they're of course not completely straight, because there'll be local topological conditions or demand side conditions, so whatever it might be that has determined exactly where they're traced. And maybe those reasons why they ended up there would be valid also for the purpose of this counterfactual modeling. So maybe it would be useful to model this counterfactual based on the exact traces of what we do see on the ground, as that de facto we know could be constructed. So that'll be it. I have some smaller comments. Be interested in some interaction effects, for instance, between firms and neighborhoods, and the extent to which firms follow neighborhood populations versus just have a wider set of potential customers as travel costs decrease, and a few smaller comments that I will send to Paul as well here. But yes, that'll be it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Arthur. Yeah, I would be interested if you can send me the slide after.
Absolutely, yes. Right, how do I stop sharing though? Because I think it'll be easier. Yes, okay.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Now, Paul, if you want to answer some of his comments, you are welcome to do it.
So either I can take maybe some other comments if there are, or I can directly respond to Arthur. I don't know.
You can answer now, and if there is
Okay.
anyone who has a question, you can raise your hand, and we will pass your question now.
Okay. So about that's true about the Petite Ceinture station location. It might be a bit undangerous, especially if we think that Haussmann with Napoleon III want to displace factories that create some disamenities within the city center. They may want to displace the factories towards the periphery, and it could be done through the Petite Ceinture. So I should maybe investigate this kind of factor, political one, but also, as you said, observable factor, as you said, free space, also already existing transport network. I should definitely check that. You maybe about your comment on the grid cell, so it's more about the defensive estimate I did not really present today. So the estimates are a bit sensitive to which grid size I want to choose, 400 by 400 or a bit smaller and so on. So it's about the defensive, but when I do the market access measure, I get rid of this 400 by 400 and I use 200 by 200, which are way smaller. Why? Because I only focus on the 1861 to 1896. And for the firm, I've got less grid cell with zero observation. Okay. Then I think that your comment on the metro line 1 and 4 of the actual metro line of 1 and 4 of the Parisian metro really makes sense, and it would be more realistic compared to just draw some straight line between the north, south, and east and west. So yeah, thank you. It makes sense.
Thank you.
Now, Gabriele, if you want to ask a question.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions to learn more about the setting and also to understand some of the choices. So the first one is that at the beginning you said that there's 3 phases of development, which seem to happen one after the other, if I remember correctly. So I wonder if there's some interesting variation there that you could use to further your empirical results there, maybe for robustness, or it might be interesting to look even if there's some shorter term effects that might be useful as well. And finally, I'm interested in this tradable versus non-tradable distinction because I guess that for tradables, we might have some more spillovers. So when we talk about tradables in this setting, do we think about firms that sell nationally? Do they sell more regionally? So I'm trying to understand what type of tradables were produced back then. And finally, there's this liberal professions. So you say there's this placebo test in which you look and you see no effect on liberal professions, but I still quite don't understand what actually liberal professions are. So if you could give a little bit more information more on that, that will be quite good too. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So for the 3 different phases, I try to exploit them with the defensive. So from what I did, so with the Stargardt defensive design, I saw no short-term effect. So it really the effect really kick off at the end of the period when the circular line is completely achieved. Okay, so when the 3 phases are achieved. And I tried also to compare treated versus not yet treated, but I lack a bit of statistical power. Regarding your comment on the tradable sector, that's true that the tradable sector. I consider factories that produce clothing and so on, and then might also export to the other part of the France. So I don't know how I could model that within the structural model or even within the Redis-form evidence. But yeah, I'm really considering some sectors that export final good toward everywhere. And regarding the liberal profession, so here I select some professions such as lawyer, teacher, and so on, that apparently do not have any interest to locate near to the Petite Ceinture. And that's how I consider this kind of placebo test here. So I don't know if I was clear about the tradable sector, but feel free to ask.
No, it's okay. Just to understand how the tradable sector affects other units. So I guess in your model, the tradable sector also sells goods all across the board. So that might be the best assumption.
I mean, I do not make the assumption. I don't know if it could maybe have an impact on the Parisian equilibrium, really, but I do not make any assumption about whether tradable or sell outside of Paris. I don't know if how I could do that and if it would be maybe useful. I don't know. I need to think about it. Thank you.